Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and for the past few months, I put school on hold, and I've been working as a full-time stop-motion animator at the new Stupid Buddy Studios in Toronto. This chat is with 25-year-old award-winning motion graphic designer and animator from the UK, William Marler, who specializes in awesome 2D animation and is a super fan of Pixar. And in our chat, he's going to share how he's managed to build a full-time career doing freelance from home and how he's picked up clients like Matt Parker, Tom Scott, and the BBC. Plus, on top of this, he's going to share a framework he's developed for when it is profitable for you to take on work for something other than money, including the only time you should do animation work for exposure. And he calls this the 6 currencies. So be sure to listen in for that because I found it quite interesting and helpful in my own pursuit of animation gigs myself. So now, without further ado, let's just jump right in. Hi, Will. Thank you so much for coming on the chat. How are you today? How are you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So we're going to chat about how to make a living doing animation and to be happy with that living at the same time. So let's roll it back to the start. How did you stumble into this wonderful field industry yourself?
So I was born in 1995, which is the year that Toy Story came out in America. So I was very much sort of I grew up on Pixar, very much being sort of part of my formative years. So I watched obviously the Toy Story films, but then The Incredibles came out when I was about 9. So getting more to a point where I can, appreciate that film for it just being other than just a collection of shapes and colours and, sounds on the screen. And I adored Pixar from that sort of age. And then when I was, for my 10th birthday, I got my first mobile phone with a camera on it. It was a Sony Ericsson with a sort of a screen that you didn't flip up like a sort of, one of those old flip phones.
You got a phone for your 10th birthday?
I did, but this is the cool part, right?
2005?
Yeah, the screen, right? This is how funky the 2000s were. The screen didn't flip up like a sort of Motorola Razr or whatever. It twisted up. I mean,
oh my gosh! I think I know what you're talking about.
I was the coolest kid on the playground for about 10 minutes.
I got my first phone in 2007, and I felt like I was an early mover. So you were at the top of the game back then.
Well, yeah, I was like I say, I was the sort of top of my class, the most popular kid in school for about 10 minutes, and then
I'm also curious. Just let me just interrupt you. So 1995 Toy Story came out. I was already 7 and I saw it and I thought it was like the best thing in the world. But you grew up from like 0 watching it over and over again. So was it still as impactful to you, or was it like me growing up watching Bugs Bunny and just being like, this is a part of the animation scene, it's entertaining but it's not blowing my mind because I've seen it since I was born type of thing? Was Toy Story for that, for that?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I've always said, and this is sometimes a bit of an unpopular opinion, I've always said that Toy Story 2 is the best Toy Story film out of the 4 that now exists. Toy Story, and I think partly because by the time that Toy Story 2 came out, I was a little bit older, or by the time we got it on VHS and whatever, I was a little bit older. It was the one that I watched over and over and over again. It's like the Toy Story film I remember from my childhood. I had the PS1 game. I had like CD-ROMs for the PC and all that sort of stuff. And I think also the thing with Toy Story is there's always like a bit of a bias with Toy Story because of the fact that it's the first Toy Story film. It's the first Pixar film. So inevitably, when you watch it again with sort of fresh eyes, where you're old enough to appreciate it, you are a bit like, there are bits that are, obviously a bit clunky or a bit sort of they're finding their feet and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, I think, like I say, The Incredibles was probably where I got to that point where I was able to watch it and sort of be excited about a storyline and be excited about things like the music. And I remember I saw the trailer, the little teaser trailer for The Incredibles on the Finding Nemo DVD. So I felt like I was one of the first people in the world to know about The Incredibles, which is obviously complete rubbish, but you know, you sort of feel like you got this insider knowledge because I saw it on the Finding Nemo DVD. So when it came out in cinemas, it was like, oh yeah, I've known about that for you know, a year or so. And I remember actually I saw The Incredibles with my whole family. My mum is a nurse and she came home from her job at the hospital having done a whole sort of 12-hour shift. She came straight from work to see it with us at the cinema, which is sort of quite fitting because The Incredibles is obviously a story all about sort of the family all coming together, and there's a sort of really nice symmetry to that, which is really meaningful to me. But yeah, so going back to getting my first phone,
back to the flip phone
related to so that is the first time I ever had a camera at my, you know, immediate disposal. So I was filming random little clips of my friend, editing them on the, you know, video editor on the phone, which was the most rudimentary editor in the world. But just little things like one of them that I did with my friend Matt would be running around doing sort of spy moves or something. He would do like tumble rolls and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, right, I'm going to put the Mission Impossible theme underneath it. You know, there's sort of quirky videos that you do and you think you're the coolest person in the world just because you've got this sort of soundtrack beneath you. And then that moved into sort of making webcam videos. I was actually on YouTube making videos at the age of probably about 10 or 11. And I got there was a YouTuber that took one of my videos and put, bearing in mind, like I say, I was about 10 or 11, but I got a YouTube video made about me where they took one of my videos, replace the soundtrack with a song called I Take Drugs, right? Which is, you know, and the, I think the title was called something like, I think it was Toronto 979, which was my tag, takes drugs. And bear in mind, like I say, I was like a 10 or 11-year-old and this random person from, you know, the internet was taking the mick out of me. And the funny thing is, because I've got a health condition, I just sort of took it literally, and I was like, yeah, I do take drugs. What's your point? But I got YouTuber hate back in 2006. You know, like at the age of 10 or 11 or so. But yeah, so I started off making these videos and then turned into webcam videos, and then I got camera and all that sort of stuff. Upgraded video editing software, and then I got Sony Vegas, which was something that I could do animation with as well. So I slowly started to learn that program, and then got into animation, then got into graphic design through that, and went through like this quite organic journey from wanting to be a filmmaker when I was really young, when I was a kid, wanting to be an animator, and then wanted to be a graphic designer. And then when I was at college, I went back to wanting to be an animator, and that's where I've sort of stuck with since the age of 16, 17, and that's where I am today at the age of 25.
Nice. It's interesting for me to always hear how people ended up where they are today, and it's like everybody has a completely different story, but it's kind of driven by the same thing. Would I be wrong to say that you were driven by storytelling at the start? Like you wanted to tell stories, like you were, or I don't know, tell me.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I think the thing that I loved about Pixar, as you know, my early inspiration was these incredible worlds that you were taken to. You know, they were very varied. Each different franchise is, you know, an entirely new universe of characters and, you know, monsters and underwater and superheroes and toys, and you know, it's just like being taken to a brand new world. And I did quite a lot of animation sort of based around these sort of worlds, or often what I used to do when I was younger was try and recreate my own versions of TV shows that I liked. So there was a really niche British children's show back in the late 90s, early 2000s called Zap, which was it was like a comic book that came to life. This kids show. It's like sketches of different characters, but I really enjoyed that when I was a kid, and then rediscovered it when I was sort of a young teenager, and started to make my own sort of version of that with my, filming myself as different characters, and then doing the graphics and the editing. I think one of the things that I actually was really drawn to, other than just the worlds and storytelling and stuff, is actually the production process itself, the sort of the whole process of devising a concept of something like a TV show or a film or a project or something like that, and all the things that came with that. And that's partly why, I had such varied interests in filmmaking and animation and graphic design. I like to have my fingers in a lot of pies, as it were, like, thinking about the branding, or the script writing, or the animation production itself, or all these different things. And we'll talk later about a project that I'm working on at the moment, which I'm doing from scratch entirely myself, which involves all these different things. And even today, when I do client projects, I often do them entirely on my own, because I like doing all the different sides to a project.
Nice. So let's fast forward a bit and talk about how you actually got into the professional world of animation once you developed this organic love for it and then studied it in school. What was your first job, and how did you snag it?
So I actually started doing freelance projects from quite an early age, really, around the age of 15. So when I was still at sort of secondary or high school, I started doing, when I was around the time when I was working in graphic design, sort of as my interest. Just often stuff for friends, really. A friend of mine, a guy called Luke, wrote a book, did a self-published book, a self-published novel, and he needed a cover, cover, spine and back cover designed. And he went to me, and it was, I can't remember exactly how much I got paid, maybe like 20 quid or something, £20. And but that was still my first sort of paid project, and that was now nearly about 11 years ago. And then from there, just odd little projects for people that my brother knew, or people at the school. Again, a lot of them weren't paid stuff. They were just, doing stuff for the school, helping out with different advertising for events or whatever it was. But when I went to university, that's when I started doing my sort of first proper paid animation jobs. And my first freelance job was for a guy called Riz, who was a recent graduate of the course that at that point I just enrolled in at Birmingham City University, the film and animation course. And it was he was doing a music video for a local band for a song called Eat the Poor, which was a sort of satirical take on like political figures, like the then Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron. And it was showing him in like a sort of dinosaur onesie, playing around with a helicopter and a whole city, like almost like a playing Godzilla type thing, as this child, but also the Prime Minister. And he needed some different bits doing, like rigging up. I designed this toy helicopter in Adobe Illustrator, and then rigged it up in After Effects so that you could control the propellers and the speed of the propellers, and shoot, have a thing that came out that shot some like Nerf gun style missiles and all that sort of stuff. But that was very much like a proper project where I was like, okay, there's a deadline to this. I'm working with someone else, back and forth with revisions and stuff like that, as opposed to just a sort of someone asking me to do something and it being a lot more informal. This was my first proper project.
Gotcha.
And then from there, going through university, I just again did more odd jobs and different bits like that. So one of the great things about the course that I did was there was actually a marking, sort of a part of the marking scheme that they marked you on, which promoted you doing client projects. So you could submit your client projects as long as you sort of talked about them in the same way that you talked about your main university work, breaking down the process and all the different, sketches development and, evaluation and things, you could get marked on those because it showed that you were doing it was called collaboration and enterprise, because it was showing that you were doing things outside of just your university course, and that you were establishing yourself as a professional. So the fact that that was promoted as part of my course and I was able to get, marks for it, it always felt like, it was still part of my journey at uni, instead of having, I had to balance this, or I don't have time to do client work because I'm too busy with university work. That was
Did
made
your
to seem
program
like a
also
really
have
good
an
idea.
internship at the same time, or was this kind of instead of an internship, I guess?
So it wasn't actually sort of a formal thing. It was sort of like, well, if you do get client projects, then they can be marked on this sort of marking section of the module. They didn't do an internship year, like a formal, okay, this year is for you to get an internship. It was a lot more informal with that, and that wasn't. Some people want a different sort of thing from their course. Some people benefit from a strict, like, okay, you've got to get a job now for this year. But actually having the flexibility of doing my own personal projects and establishing myself as a freelancer.
So you were
really
already
helpful.
kind of a freelancer. Well, you were a freelancer for many years, up even from high school, and you are now. But you had a couple of years in between where you decided to take a studio job and kind of not go the freelance route. So I want to know why you decided to go the 9 to 5, and then why you decided to get back to the freelance life.
Well, when I graduated university, in the UK at least, the sort of funding for universities meant that I now have, I've got my student debt and all that sort of stuff. But from a sort of practical viewpoint, I didn't actually need to pay for university in the same way. You get a loan and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't actually necessarily see that money. Apart, you apply for the loan and then it immediately goes to your course and your living and all that sort of stuff. So, and also my financial situation meant that I wasn't having to necessarily sort of balance a job in order to sort of fund my accommodation and all that sort of stuff. But as soon as I graduated from uni, I was aware that I was going to have to, either, I didn't want to move back in with my parents. I wanted to continue the journey of independence. So I was going to look for a flat in Birmingham, where I was planning to continue to stay in the UK. And obviously for that comes with all sorts of bills and stuff that I don't have the funding for unless I just get a job and start working. So I knew at this point that wasn't going to be covered by just doing client projects, because the amount that I'd be able to get, but also the fact that it wouldn't be stable enough. Like it'd be very bitty. There'd be some here and there, if any at all, because at this point, still the client projects I was getting at uni weren't.
So reality kicked you in the face and told you to get
absolutely,
a job. Okay.
Absolutely. So and fate actually sort of was on my side at this point, because my tutor at uni emailed me saying that there's a local production company, a place called Ember Television, that is looking for I think at that point it was just a 3-month internship or 6-week internship, something like that, for new students, and because someone was leaving, and so they needed someone to rehire. They weren't going to do like a full-time permanent contract, but they were happy to do this more shorter term contract. So I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I went for the interview and they were happy to offer me the internship. And that, after, because of some sort of logistical difficulties with securing the internship, that then just turned into a normal, they were just going to offer me a permanent position, just as if they're hiring anyone else. So that was really lucky. And the fate of all that happening right at the point where I was starting to look for a job close to graduating was, the chance of that was really, really lucky for me. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more as well, but it's one of those things where I was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
But that actually was almost something that I was able to manufacture a little bit during uni, because the fact that I was the first person that my tutor thought of when they got this email saying that there was a position opening up, and then also obviously the going to the interview and making them happy to hire me in the first place was obviously entirely my doing. But the actual circumstances of those things, those opportunities opening themselves up to me, was something that I was totally out of my control, and is entirely, it's the fate of the gods or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely want to chat about how you kind of manufacture your own luck. But so you're working the studio life now. It's paying your bills, and
mhm.
then you decide, I want to go back to freelance. Is that because you built up enough freelance projects over the years?
So it's a combination of as is often the case with making big decisions like taking a job or leaving a job or changing your work situation. It was a combination of lots of different factors. The studio that I worked at, Ember Television, they did a lot of work for the financial industry. They were very sort of specific with their focus, and at first that was really interesting because it was a brand new area that I'd never done animation for. It feels like the sort of thing that you wouldn't necessarily associate with animation and motion graphics. So it felt like it was a sort of fresh perspective, but also I thought, I could do, these sort of animation motion graphics examples in the financial industry sometimes can be very varied in terms of quality. So I thought I could do a lot better than a lot of other studios potentially are doing. And it felt like a challenge as well. It felt like the sort of thing, if my job is to make this interesting and to make it engaging, a subject that is often seen as either really complicated or really dreary and boring, then that's like challenge accepted. So that was really great. But then over the time, I found that having that hyper focus from that studio and not really deviating much from any of those sort of types of clients, I needed a bit more of a fresh sort of ream of projects. Another thing is that, as I mentioned earlier very briefly, I've got a health condition. I've got cystic fibrosis. So with that comes a lot of different challenges in terms of maintaining my health, and that's my fitness and exercise routines and medicine and physiotherapy and all that sort of stuff. But sometimes it means I have to go into hospital for like top up stays of like 2-week antibiotics. And during one of those stays, that I feel like was probably caused by having done having had a full-time job for the very first time in my entire life for 9 months, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, something that I'd never really done before. I think I sort of burned out a little bit, and physically, mentally. And so whilst I was in hospital, I realised that actually this isn't working anymore, for the reason of wanting to branch out and do other things, but also for the reason of it's clearly affecting my health, and I need to have a lot more flexibility. So it was at that point that I decided I was going to go freelance. But it was also because I felt comfortable knowing that even if I went freelance, I probably would still be working with Ember. At the time, another thing is that the types of, because they did live action stuff as well. So a lot of their stuff was live action. The live action people were busy every day, whereas the animation output wasn't always the same amount. So there were some times where I went into work and there just wasn't enough for me to be getting on with. But if I worked with them on a freelance basis, then it would mean that I'd be able to still do plenty of work with them over a course of a year, but also have time off where they don't need animation work, and I can do other projects, find other clients.
Gotcha.
And I felt like I was in a position after being at Ember as well, that I knew you just pick up sort of certain business skills, certain sort of client-facing, client discussion skills, how to market yourself. So I picked up some of those sort of soft skills and felt like I can apply this to myself as a freelance. I can start to really, attract new clients, and I just felt ready to take the plunge.
So even though the reason you took the job is because at the time you didn't think you could maintain, paying bills and being out on your own with a freelance career, you reached a point where you felt you'd learned enough you could feel comfortable kind of going out into the unknown, hashtag Frozen 2, I guess, and make it and kind of not look back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I felt like I was ready. I mean, I should say I'm also, financially, not everyone is in that situation. If people are living paycheck to paycheck, then it's just the case for some people that they won't be able to take that risk.
So like when you're working at a studio, you don't have to worry, at least for the duration of that contract, about where your work is coming from. The studio producers, owners, whatever, worry about that stuff. So now that you are on your own, how do you make sure you're getting in a constant stream of work for yourself versus like relying on somebody else? Like you said, you learned some marketing things. Like what do you specifically do to make sure you have a stable freelance career?
Yeah, so I actually, it's funny because you sort of expect that, okay, that's going to be sort of going to, I don't know, at that point, because it was obviously 3 years before COVID, at that point going to business conferences or networking events or whatever it is. I didn't actually really do any of that. I stayed a lot more local, I suppose. I suppose like connecting with people that I knew of, and I made a lot of connection. I did most of the work, if anything, of making connections and things when I was at university.
Gotcha.
Whenever there'd be sort of speakers from local studios come in, I'd always be one of the people to wait around afterwards and go up and talk to them. And
what do you say when you talk to a speaker? Like I've always, like I just say, hey, do you want to come on a podcast? And that's my conversation starter.
Yeah.
But like I feel really awkward and weird going up to a speaker and just being like, hi, I like that point, what you said. My name is Terry. Like, how do you be like,
it's just,
how can I meet somebody and turn it into a business?
Well, I suppose it's just, you're not necessarily going into that conversation. I think if some people can see that you're talking to them just to be able to give them your business card like a mile off, like if that's the only reason that you've approached them and that's all it is, it's a bit like, messaging someone on Instagram, hey, how are you? It'd be great to catch up. By the way, have a look at this stuff that I've done recently. Like you have no intention of catching up with that person, and they can probably tell. Similarly, when you go to, a speaking event or something, and you meet someone afterwards, I don't know, it's just really making them feel like you were, you enjoyed what they had to say. Like you say, maybe there's a point that really resonated with you, and maybe you've had a couple of minutes to mull it over. I mean, a lot of these people as well, because you're not necessarily the only person going up to them, you might be waiting around for a little bit, and that's the perfect opportunity to sort of have a think of what am I going to say, what am I going to tell them. But to be honest, I think a lot of the time, some people, they're just potentially interested in hearing what you're working on, and just to say that you're working on something, or I really liked your XYZ, this specific film. It's like when you apply for a job or something, it really shows you can show off a little bit by sort of mentioning something specific from their website, a specific project or something like that makes them feel like your application email isn't just a copy paste that you're doing to everyone. You're specifically going, I have looked at your website, here's the proof, because I watched this project. Similarly, if there's an animator coming, and often, especially at uni, these things get advertised in advance, so you've got the opportunity, maybe it's a week or it's even a day or something, to at least go on their website, have a look at a specific project. You don't need to make notes or sort of write an essay or an analysis of it or whatever, but just to
do
watch
some
it
research,
and
be familiar with their stuff. And then how do you say, I loved what you did on this, it reminded me of my own work that I'm doing.
I suppose it's just, I'm not a sort of networking expert at all. I think that a lot of people will be able to offer specific step-by-step tips of how to speak to people, and I know that also the other thing is that a lot of people within the creative industry may have difficulties with sort of social anxiety, and I'm saying like, yeah, just go up to people and have a chat with them, you know, and they're like, what, you mean strangers that we've never met, you know, as if it's the easiest thing in the world. For a lot of people, especially as they're growing up, that is like the last thing that they want to do, and can be a very difficult sort of thing to do. But the more you do it, the easier it will get. But I think it's just a case of, like I say, just talking to them, and not seeing them as a sort of, you know, dollar signs or something, just seeing them as a fellow animator, just having a conversation like you would someone else that you've met, that
so your goal,
really remove the opportunity sort of aspect from it entirely, and then it might feel a bit more organic to mention something that you've been working on.
So your goal with specifically what we're talking about, I guess, is just walking up to people at conferences or networking, is to just connect with this person as a fellow animator with no strings attached. And then if the opportunity comes up, to just, you know, talk about it as a fellow animator and not try to sell yourself and make that connection.
I think, because, you know, I think with a lot of these things, it's almost like a little bit of the long game, that the more meaningful connections are probably going to come from people that you sort of make effort with, as opposed to seeing people sort of just as an opportunity. I suppose the way that I can sort of rephrase it a little bit is, imagine that you're in a position where you are a successful animator, you've been working in the field for, you know, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, something like that. You've got a brand new project coming out, a brand new film or a new series or something happening that's really exciting, and you've been invited to do one of these sort of talks. And someone comes up to you afterwards and, you know, oh, how great is it that all these people have waited around to speak to me? This is really, it means a lot. Someone comes up to you and, you know, you just can tell that they're only talking to you, and the only reason they've hung around is because they want a job. And it's not because they want a job with you because you're their idol or whatever it is. It's because they want a job, and they want any old job, and this is an opportunity. Just, I suppose, having that empathy or that compassion to think, how would that make me feel if I was in their position? You know, it might make me feel a bit cheap or a bit used or something. You know, that, I think, makes it feel a lot sort of better about the idea of playing that long game. I say playing the long game again, as if it's, you know, that makes it sound like, you know, you're only forming these relationships for the purposes of getting something back. But at least sort of, I suppose, making the effort or forming these connections, because the clients that I've done, I don't sort of to have regular projects coming in, it's not a case of reaching out to loads and loads of people and putting feelers out absolutely everywhere. If anything, it's about having lots of projects with a small number of clients. But it's because I've formed a good relationship with these clients that I'm their go-to, you know, animator, instead of sort of being the one person in a sea of many potentially that they could go to. I'm potentially the only one, or one of two, or something like that. And that's mainly what happens. It's more about the quantity of projects with clients than the quantity of clients that has helped me establish, you know, over the past 3 years, my freelance portfolio.
That makes a lot of sense, because like my immediate mind when thinking about freelance is like, I need to reach out to every single studio person connection possible and try to get 100 projects from 100 different studios lined up, so I've like confirmed work for the next year. But your take is like,
at first that is definitely necessary.
Step one is to do that.
Step one is to do all of that.
If you land a project, turn it into a long-term relationship. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because step one is, you know, is to throw as much as you can at the wall and see what sticks, sort of thing. In that, because you can't, because at the end of the day, if you contact 100 different places, then a good sort of 80 of them may well not even get back to you, and then you know, may well just not have any projects for you or anything like that. So immediately, a large percentage of the people that you contact just, you know, aren't going to go anywhere with, you know, for you.
I mean,
and yeah,
that totally makes sense. And like in my business career, when I was heading up the content side of the software company that I was working at, I would hire writers and videographers to create content for us. And at the start, I would try to always, like, you know, I don't know how to say this in a bad way. I wouldn't pay top dollar because my experience was I need to find somebody that I want to build a relationship with. And it was really hard to do that because everybody, there's websites where you can like hire writers, there's recommendations, there's agencies and stuff. And what I found was if I paid a lot of money up front, the quality I got back was kind of random. It was like, this person is, what I'm trying to say is it was very hard to find somebody to build a relationship with because a lot of the people that I went through were just seeing this as a one-time job and just giving me this standard thing that wasn't really tailored to what I needed and didn't have like the special sauce, and would move on, and I would move on too. But there were a couple people that I ended up really, they wanted to like build a relationship with our company, and I ended up using them for many years and would actually say like, hey, I want to pay you more this time. I want to keep paying you more because I really value your work and I want to work with you. And so on the business side of things, as the client, I wanted to have an easier life by having somebody who understood what we were building, and I was fine, just keep giving you work. So I guess my point is, I don't know what my point is. My point is it's better to build a relationship with a company and try to make them successful at the same time. Obviously, you're not going to always get, I don't know, amazing pay or benefits or whatever back, but the people who are treating it like a one-time job, I only gave it to them that one time because I could instantly tell that too. Is this making sense? I feel like this jumbled up thoughts that just came out and it was not succinct.
I know someone that went for a job interview that I sort of recommended for him, and for a studio that I also was sort of associated with for a bit, and they didn't give him the job because he described his sort of why he wanted to work there as I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was basically that he sort of said that he was wanting to he was wanting to test the waters. Like he was sort of wanting to, like, he didn't see it as a long-term thing. It felt like a sort of, he wants to see what a studio is like, and that may well be the exact reason why you're wanting to become a full-time studio animator, because you're not entirely sure that it was the right thing, but you just want to see if that is the way that you prefer working than freelance. But you don't tell the person that you're sort of having the interview with, because like you said, it's better to make people think that you're sort of there for, the long term, again, even if you're not. With every client that I do a project with, I try and see the way that I can do the next project with them. I try and sort of spot opportunities for how something could be developed further, or how this same type of project could be done, repeated again for future things. So, for example, before COVID, at least before they closed, I did a lot of work for the National Sea Life Centre in the UK, and they had these campaigns every now and then for advertising campaigns, billboard campaigns, and with that would come a animated advert, sort of 10-15 seconds, that was shown in the local sort of city train station. So it's these like portrait animated billboard, these video billboards, and my job was fairly simple in the sense of taking these Photoshop files for these ad campaigns directly from the ad agency and animating them for this sort of 10-second, 15-second format. And I sort of then thought, okay, well, I've noticed that their social media presence it doesn't really link in with these campaigns. I don't feel like they're using them in the best way. And I mean, that format for an ad campaign for a moving billboard, that's the exact same format that could be used for Instagram stories. So I thought, well, if you want for an extra X amount of, pounds, I will then take what we've just done and create an Instagram friendly version for you. and also an Instagram square format for you. And, you know, properly, not just like squashing it down, you know, properly like making it look really nice for square format and for Instagram. There's a bit of tweaking you need to do for Instagram to make sure there's space for like the swipe up and the banner at the top that shows the account name and stuff. So I just thought, okay, you know, we've just done this project. Let's make this for your, you know, for your social media and Facebook and things like that. And they were really, you know, they thought it was a great idea. And that just became an extra step that I did whenever I did any, you know, whenever they came back to me for their new campaigns. So I was able to take one project, one job, and turn it into about 3, you know, mini jobs. And again, that was something that was repeated as they came back with new campaigns. And obviously, there's certain caveats when it comes to that. Obviously, you've got to spot these opportunities, but you've also got to impress them the first time around anyway, because people aren't necessarily, like you've said, with people that you hired or worked with. If, you know, maybe you miss deadlines, or maybe the work that you do, you know, the projects that you did the first time around, I don't know, there was these little mistakes, or your attention to detail wasn't that great, or whatever it was, then, you know, they might not be as keen to be like, to, you know, allow you to ask for extra work, or to have these ideas of other things that you could work on. Whereas if you're like, look, I smashed the first project, you know, you're really happy with that, I got it to you on time, you know, really efficient, then it makes them think, oh, this Facebook thing, they could do that, they can tick that off, you know, this person can tick that off for our social media, but I also know that they'll be able to deliver it really quickly, and they'll do a really good job, and it'll be, you know, we won't need to worry about amends and stuff like that as much. Obviously amends can come, but not like amends of, oh, you spelt that incorrectly, or you know, this is overlapping this and looks weird, or whatever it is, you know, little slip-ups. So I think you've also got to put in the effort to really wow them the first time round, and show that. And again, it's the little things, those attention to detail things, like just delivering on time, or if for whatever reason you're not going to be able to deliver on time, you know, giving them a heads up, and just instead of just on the day that you're meant to deliver, saying, oh, by the way, I'm running behind, you know, give them a couple of days if you can, sort of warning. So that's what I've been able to do to try and keep the clients that I've found.
I've never really heard of this before. And it's so, like, to me, it's so smart. I'm really digging this idea of saying like, hey, I'm already doing this project for you. And then just doing a little digging on the company to see what other opportunities there might be. Maybe it's not social media, maybe it's like a website banner, or like, who knows, whatever. And then just making it your problem. Because like, thinking back to when I was heading up content, if I wanted to launch something on social media, I have to think through all this process myself. I have to think, who am I going to hire? What am I going to put there? But if somebody who's already doing the 15-second ads on train stations for me reaches out, I don't have to think about that anymore. It makes sense. I'd rather just put up a little bit of money and say, great, now we have content that I don't have to worry about for social media. That's amazing. And obviously, like, if you're not killing yourself at work, you can just take something, assets you already have, and reformulate them a little bit for a little bit of extra. But I think that's really smart. And that's a key way to like build a longer term relationship, because not only are you their video person, now you're their go-to social media person. So that I don't know if this happened, but did they ever come to you and say like, look, we would like you to build XYZ for social media separate from these train ads?
That's that exact thing happens.
So now you have double the work from them, right? And you didn't
exactly. So I did
these
these
have projects
to reach out
to 100 people.
Exactly, I did these projects for these train station billboards, and then there was projects that were specifically just for social media, so just for Instagram, just for Facebook, had no real world sort of you know, place or sort of billboard equivalent. It was just for social media, but that was because we'd already talked about the other things that you know, we'd already had discussions about social media presence, and I'd done stuff, you know, thinking about social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as part of the conversations we were having, as part of the email chains. You know, those things were just brought up, and I suppose it's just thinking, like you've said, you know, you're having their whole sort of company in mind of what do they do. And I suppose just the fact that you can comment on their social media presence shows that you've actually had a look at their social media. You know, you've maybe given them a follow or something like that, which sounds tiny and it sounds insignificant, but like you say, little things like that just show that you're not seeing them as dollar signs. You know, you're seeing them as clients that you're wanting to, you know, explore their brand or see what they've got to offer, or just, you know, you're seeing them as what they do, not just what money they can give you.
Yeah. So maybe let's chat. I feel like you've kind of subliminally given us hints of this, but what is your overall strategy of how you're managing your career? So like thinking of the long term, like, you know, Will is a animator, he works from home, he does freelance. What is your overall strategy for building this as a strong and great career where you accomplish, you know, artistically the things you want to do, internally the steps you want to take, you know, finances, relationships, like all these things that are part of a career? What is this strategy of yours, especially now that there's COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I'd say that with every project, what I will do actually on the project, so I will meet deadlines. That's the absolute top one for me. It's something that I pride myself on, which again, it seems like an obvious thing. It seems like, well, of course you'd meet deadlines, but I've met plenty of people who say that they've sort of been let down by animators or whatever, not meeting deadlines. Just not necessarily always setting deadlines, but just giving them expectations on, okay, how long is this going to take? This is what you're paying for. You're paying for X amount of days of my time, and I'll be able to get the first edit to you, you know, on this date. That estimating the correct amount of time that you're comfortable, you know, that you will meet, that takes a lot of experience. And like I say, the fact that I've been using the Adobe programs and, you know, doing proper big projects for over about 11 years now. Actually, it's longer than 11 years. So it will, yeah, it'd be something like 13 years. It gives you, well, yeah, exactly. It gives you, you know, the more that you do that, it gives you more and more experience on correctly predicting how long, estimating how long, you know, something's going to take you.
Maybe let me rephrase a bit. So think about Will. Imagine you have whatever project you could work on in the world, unlimited resource, etc. 15 years from now, you're accomplishing everything your heart desires. What is that thing for you?
I really don't know, to be honest. I think it would be similar to actually what I'm working on at the moment, in that it's a I mean, I've got certain dream clients. I think everyone has certain dream clients, and you know, I'd love to have something of mine commissioned by Netflix or something. I mean, I had one of my goals was to do something for the BBC here in the UK, and I was very fortunate to achieve that about 2 years ago. I had a title sequence on the BBC, and then was able to do that the year after with another title sequence for like the next instalment of that series. So that was a big tick off my list.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
And so I think there's probably like this sort of, but I guess at the end of the day, like, it's difficult to say, because 15 years ago, you wouldn't have necessarily, someone that has, like yourself, who's been able to pitch for Netflix, wouldn't necessarily have chosen Netflix. You know, who's Netflix? You know, the DVD postal service. Like, you know, I feel like we changed so much that you set goals. The goals that I had 10 years ago are certainly not the same goals that I've sort of come to now. I think as we change and as the world changes, you know, I think that our goals will change. But I suppose you've touched on a couple of things. I want to definitely stay animating. I think I was featured by Adobe actually for one of their sort of student showcase things when I first started uni about 7 years ago, or 8 years ago at this point. And I said the quote at the end that they chose to wrap the whole video up was me saying, "As long as I'm animating, I'm happy." And that just feels like it still sort of resonates today. As long as I'm animating, then, you know, it doesn't really matter what I'm working on, because I'm really enjoying it, probably.
Honestly, I like that a lot, and that answers my question. Like it's I don't know, sometimes it's like society or just people in general, or just the narrative storytelling that floats in the general air wants us to have these big fantasy goals of, I want to direct a Pixar movie or whatever. And I don't know, I've been through a lot of trying to figure that out for myself, and my goal is kind of similar to what you said, just being proud of the creativity that I'm exporting and making my living off of that. And I think
I
that's totally great.
I definitely did when I was younger want to work at Pixar. Like up until probably a second year of uni, from being sort of 10 years old to the age of, let's say, 19 or something, for a strong, long amount of time, I really saw myself as someone that would eventually, want to hopefully eventually work at Pixar. I remember there was I saw Monsters University. The beautiful timing of this, I saw Monsters University a couple of months before going to university. And I was one of those people who would stay at the credits because I knew that there was going to be a post-credit scene, and this wasn't even part of the MCU. This was part of the Pixar cinematic universe. But I stayed at the credits, and the credits rolled. And I remember, it's really corny, really cheesy, but I still quite like it. The credits rolled, and I just sort of said to myself in an empty theatre, something like, "I'm going to be there one day." And I imagine the cleaner at one point was like, "What do you say, mate?" Because I was literally the only person in there with this person just getting stray bits of popcorn. But as the time has gone on, like I don't know, it's not necessarily either you're not the person that you thought you were going to be, so that situation changes. The place that you thought was this dream, wonderful sort of Garden of Eden of animation, certain things get revealed about their work culture, which maybe makes you think, is that really the place for me? And I'm sure that things have changed for the better since Pete Docter took over. I'd like to hope anyway, but it's sort of this sort of dream place to. I'm looking over here with all my Pixar postcards put up, but like I say, you sort of see Pixar, for example, as this is, they all roll around on scooters, and you can decorate your little cave of whatever into, oh, look at this guy, he's got like a tiki lounge theme going on, whatever. And it's like, oh, actually there's stuff behind the scenes that I don't think would make me want to work for this place, or whatever it is. But also this idea that I suppose the realities of, if you work at a massive studio, then it's going to take a while probably before you're able to get into a position, if at all, where you can, if you really want to do something. And again, I'm not talking from experience whatsoever. This is just what I'm aware of big studios, but you become a bit of a smaller cog in a larger machine, which for some people is exactly what they want to, there's something wonderful about being part of something much bigger than you. And no matter how small it is, I imagine having any impact on something like a Pixar film feels absolutely incredible. But like I said to you earlier, I used to do projects when I was younger that started from scratch. I had the idea, I would do sketches, scripts, I would make production plans. And again, this is at the age of like 10 or 11. I had my big folder of things and I got properly like admin about all this sort of stuff at that sort of age. Like everyone was sort of going out and playing football or whatever, and I was like, okay, so the production schedule for this project, so I'm going to need to do some character designs today. And it was just ridiculous from that sort of younger age. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do any of that at somewhere like Pixar, because I'm going to have a bit more of a specific focused role. So I knew that sort of as I grew older, that I grew out of that Pixar, that Pixar dream. And also the other thing is that I grew up with this sort of, I'd say arrogant, but I'd say more naive idea that, I would definitely even be able to get a job at Pixar. Like somewhere like Pixar is obviously so competitive that, the amount of people that everyone wants to work at, you think of this, oh, I've got such an interesting dream. but the amount of every animator at some point, near enough wants to work at someone like Pixar or Disney, or so you're sort of competing against all these people. And at the end of the day, like, unfortunately, it gets to a point where if for whatever reason you decide to leave, like I say, the amount of people queuing up at the door wanting to get a job, like, you will be replaced fairly easily.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a much smaller studio, then you have a lot more opportunity to really make your mark, and get your sort of your unique creative experience sort of stamped onto their work.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing as well is that I never really got into 3D, like CGI stuff, and given that is like 95% of what Pixar do, I'm not a 3D animator, and I've come to love, absolutely adore 2D as an animator, much more than 3D. So, I mean, there's all these different things. So your dreams and things are wonderful and motivational and great, but I think it would be silly now for me to pin everything on a specific path, as opposed to just doing it day to day and just seeing how things go. Because I wouldn't have, as I'm sure we'll talk about, I wouldn't have at all predicted how 2020 work-wise was going to go for me. Right. So I just went along with it, and it was wonderful.
I think, what you just said definitely makes sense, and I just wanted to reiterate it. I think when you're young and you have these dreams, like, I want to work at Pixar, what it probably meant was, I want to make something that feels amazing as Pixar. It doesn't have to be Pixar specifically. And then as you grew older and you realize, like, okay, Pixar, if I want to work at Pixar, like, if I want to, I guess 2D storyboarding is probably the closest thing. If you want to be a storyboarder at Pixar, you can only do that one thing, basically. They're not going to let you dabble in a little bit of 3D animation and do a little bit of storyboarding and then write some script and then do some post editing. You're only going to do that one thing. So as you learned and you grew and you became more of who you are and what you liked, you said you liked creating the script and then executing it and then doing the animation and then all that. You like doing the whole process, and that didn't line up anymore with doing just one thing. Because if you go to apply as a storyboard artist at Pixar and you're up against somebody who from a very young age has been like, I found that I just love doing storyboards, and they only do storyboards, and they've been practicing storyboards for the same 15 years. You've been practicing doing 100 different things. You're never going to meet their quality and expertise and skill level, because their age is ahead of you. And so it doesn't make sense almost to pursue that. And it makes more sense to pursue a small company or something like freelance, because you're so much more involved in the process, and you can touch more pieces in the way that makes sense for who you are.
And I think that links in actually to why I feel like I've been successful with getting clients and sort of successful at marketing myself. Because, like you say, if someone at Pixar that is a storyboard artist, they're more defined by what they do. Their role is who they are, because they are a storyboard artist, and that is their bread and butter. That's what they do, and that's when they go to work. That is the role that they do, but they do it, because of that, they do that one thing incredibly well. One thing that I love doing, but also I think clients come to me for specifically, is, like I say, being able to offer lots of, like, the whole process from start to finish. So, for example, when I was at Ember Television, that first studio job, one of the things that I think I remember it sort of was quite impressive to them in the interview, was when I was saying I can take a project from start to finish with designing assets. So every project will start with designs from the ground up, and instead of having to rely on stock icon packs that A, need to be purchased, but also B, may not be particularly appropriate for licenses, but also that aren't immediately branded to each project. So I can design things, I'll animate it, do storyboards, I can do audio and sound effects, and I've got a bit of music editing, and this links also into what I did when I was younger, when I just did all these fun things. I, in my spare time, would take songs and create shortened versions by when I'd listen to a song, notice repeating elements.
Please tell me you have like Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls like shortened versions that you've created.
Not quite that far back, but certainly like just I've got a whole library of music that I've got a whole library of, I won't play any, but on my phone music app, I am an artist on my thing. So if I search myself, then I come up as an artist.
That's so cute.
And if you go on there, then you'll find a whole sort of list, a whole thing of edits and shortened versions and sort of little things like that. And it was all down to, I've noticed that it was actually, I think it started with New York, a song by Paloma Faith, because the start bit sounds identical to the end bit, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I just made this short 10-second edit that was basically the start, then fading into the end, and there's no song, and it's literally just the intro and outro but sort of stuck together. But inadvertently, that actually helped me, understand a bit better on how to make clean audio edits. And again, that's just something that I do as part of my sort of, you get something from Audio Jungle, and you're like, okay, this is 2 minutes 30 seconds. I need to then make that into a 1 minute version for this specific project. But you want to do it in a way that people don't notice the edit. It feels clean. It feels entirely made for this one project. That's just something I do as part of the process. It saves the work of maybe a producer who would usually have to do something like that. It's basically, just leave it with me. I'll do it all, and you just deliver it all. And like you said with other things, it takes the pressure of other people having to do these tasks themselves.
Totally. So what you're like, so I've talked to other people on this podcast who are entirely freelance as well. For instance, I talked to somebody who does entirely viz dev for feature films, and that's what they do. They're super well known for it. I've talked to somebody who only does storyboards for feature films and TV shows as a freelancer. But what you're telling me is you're kind of a jack of all trades freelancer. So the clients that you get, you might not get the chance to do like character development on a feature film, but your clients are more like, I'm a small or large business that doesn't have an established animation process in my playbook, and I need somebody to figure out these projects for me. They can go to you and basically say, can you figure all this out? And you'll do everything from concept to execution, including like the final edits, the sound, everything. And I think that's interesting because you are meeting a totally different part of the market than the established quote unquote animation industry, which is like TV shows and stuff like that. You're meeting like businesses needing solutions mostly. Are you doing TV shows and things like that?
Yeah, so I think that's often where there's a little bit of a line drawn between animation and motion graphics. I mean, in my mind, I prefer to think of the whole thing as animation, whether you are doing animation for TV shows on Netflix or whether you're doing animation for explainer videos and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I have done a bit of both. I done the sort of, especially when I was at Ember Television, I did a lot of sort of corporate stuff. But like I said, I've done title sequences for the BBC for 2 projects for TV. I actually did one of my favourite projects, and this was again an amazing opportunity to be able to take a project from start to finish, or at least be involved in a project from start to finish, is in 2016, so during my last year of uni, I did a project I worked with a fellow tutor doing a project where we did the opening sequence. I say we, it was quite a large team in the end. We did the opening sequence for the Brit Awards, which was, it's like for people in America that aren't as familiar with it, it's a bit like the sort of the Grammys or something like that, but for, you know, British Music Awards. It's on ITV every year. It's an enormous event at the O2 Arena, and we did the program starts. It starts with Ant and Dec, you know, presenting legends in the UK, and they do their little piece to camera, this little sketch thing. It goes to them walking to the O2 type thing, and then the camera pulls out to dancers in the O2. You know, you got the circle tables with all the celebrities and all sorts of music industry people on the floor at the O2 sitting, surrounded by dancers everywhere. There's like a zoetrope of these LED screens that were designed by designer Ez Devlin, all around in the O2, and our job was to create the stuff that's on those screens. So this was a dance choreographed by studio Wayne McGregor and Ravi Deepa. The funny thing is, he didn't even teach me ever at uni. He was just another teacher. But one of my tutors said, "Oh, Ravi, would be great to work with you," sort of thing, because I'd done an experiment for my university project that just so happened to be the exact same type of technique that he was looking to emulate in After Effects. Again, we go back to the creating your own look. That is entirely luck, entirely chance. I did not have anything to do with those two things aligning at the right place at the right time. What I did have the chance to do, though, was to show my enthusiasm. I had no idea what this project was, and I think that was purposeful, that they were like, we don't want people to be involved in this just because it's a big TV show, enormous project. We want people to be involved in it because they want to be involved in it. So I got involved in this project, and then later on it was revealed that it was going to be for the Brit Awards, and that was when I was like, okay, this has got 10 times better.
Yeah.
But I was on board from the start, sort of thing. But what that meant for the actual project was that I was involved in testing at the University Photography Studios, testing the effect, and you know, doing a bit more sort of like a runner type assistant, writing down sort of settings and stuff like that. Went filming when I was more of a runner, sort of assistant, helping out. Editing, where I was sort of doing a bit of motion graphics, and then a bit of, you know, you are the one operating Premiere at the request of the you know, the producer or the director or whatever, and then going down to the O2 and being the one that sort of, it's basically amendments, I suppose. You show it on the screen, and then you're able to notice, because it's LED panels which have to be very, very precise, 1 pixel out and you are literally on a different screen. And so, you know, we saw the whole thing, we played the whole thing with the music through the speakers of the O2 Arena. I nearly cried when I saw that for the first time, because it just completely blew me away. But then the job begins of having to edit. You know, you take notes, and you like sort of scientists sort of taking notes on this. Okay, this is test number 1. We've done that. We need to change these things, and then you change it, refine it, and get it ready. I actually had the opportunity to be at the Brits as an audience member for free because of doing all this. But I turned it down because I was far too tired, and I'd much prefer to watch the Brits at home on telly with my partner, because at that point I was just like, I'm so shattered that I need to get back home.
Well, that is a really cool experience. So maybe just one last question about kind of how you get these projects and whatnot. So one question that I've been dying to ask this whole time is, you've worked with Tom Scott, who has like, I don't know, 4 million subscribers on YouTube, and you've done
I think it's like 3.5, something like that. Yeah.
Let's round it to 4. 3.5.
3.5 million, not just 3.5 subscribers. I don't even know
3.5 million
is.
You've worked with a famous YouTuber basically, and done motion graphics for his videos, which I think is really cool, because, you know, I've watched his videos. Obviously, he's like always in my recommended feed, and then you just see that he's got graphics, and there's obviously a budget behind it, there's animators behind it, but you have no clue what's like, how does this work? Like, how did he reach out to you? Did you reach out to him? Like, how easy is it to get into YouTube or just social media influencers and get work from them? Because that's like a whole new industry that's opening up right now.
Again, another brilliant sort of opportunity to talk about chance, but also making the most of chance encounters. So like I say, I did the title sequence for the BBC, which the fact that I got that job was because I just randomly checked Facebook, checked my old uni's Facebook page, and they posted that. I never do, but I was compelled to one day for whatever reason, and found that project and immediately wrote a long email where I specifically linked to certain projects and really detailed. Anyway, got that job. Next year it came around again because it's the Christmas lectures, which are shown every year on the BBC. 3 science lectures every Christmas, and so that came around the year after. So this was in 2019, and I did it again. Again, they were really impressed with that sort of stuff, and I was invited to the day 3 recording in London, and to be in the audiences, because what it is it's mainly for kids. The audience that is mainly kids, so the main audience is school children, and then like in the rafters is like all their parents and stuff like that, and that's where we sat. So we were invited to that, myself and my partner, and also because it was day 3, it was the final lecture filming day, it was also the wrap party. So I went to that wrap party, and there were lots of people there. There was the lecturer, or the lecturers for that year, was the main lecturer was Dr. Hannah Fry, who is another sort of, she's been on channels like Numberphile on YouTube, and she does a lot of TV stuff as well. So I got to meet her, which was great. And then she had like a co-lecturer, Matt Parker, who is he's a maths YouTuber, does a lot of stuff for Numberphile and has his own YouTube channel, Stand Up Maths. But also what happened is that I was they were doing the thank yous to everyone, and they were, thank you to Hannah for an incredible lecture, thank you to Laura for producing the TV, all these sort of different people. And then it switched over to the different set of people thanking a different set of people, and then they were like, I was like, oh, they didn't mention me, but that's fine. I'm sure it's just because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But then they're like, oh, hold on, before we all start partying, sorry, someone I forgot to mention. Thank you to Will for doing the title. So not only did I get a little shout out of this rap party, I got my own special, individual, unique, shout out. But whilst they were giving these shout outs, I just sort of looked over, looking around the room. Is that Tom Scott? Because he was brought in for lecture 2 to talk about, because the lecture series that year was about the secret mathematics that operate our entire world, and so he was used as an example of the YouTube algorithm, because he's done so well on YouTube. But he was sort of saying that it's not necessarily based on he's better than anyone else. It's just like, the algorithm can be fairly random, and it can lead to, great success in his case. But, people, not everyone wins on the YouTube algorithm. So he was brought for the rap party, and I was like, right, I've got to, someone that I watched on YouTube for the past 8 years or however long, went up and I said hello. But also I'd already been introduced to him in a way by someone else saying thank you for doing the title sequence. They were like, thank you to Will for doing the title sequence. So he looked over at me, he knew who I was. The work had already been done, sort of. So I said, oh, hi, I'm Will. I did the title sequence as whoever said. But also he saw the title sequence because they played it during the filming, so he would have seen it when his filming day was on. And immediately that's like, oh wow, that's really cool, that thing that you did. That's so, using the actual project itself as who am I'm the person that made that, and the fact that you're able to, with confidence and being totally truthful, say I made that entirely from scratch, not I was one person that I did that little frame there, or I did, which, not to say there's anything bad about collaborative projects, but it feels amazing to say that you did something like that entirely you. That is you that did that. That was sort of a great in to talk to him. And then I said, you know, I know that you do he does a lot of VFX heavy videos that he does himself and can only do sort of every once a year, twice a year, because he sort of kills himself over doing it every time, you know, the amount of, oh God, I'm never going to do this again because of how difficult it is for him to do it. So I said, oh, you know, I know you do a lot of animation VFX for your YouTube videos. You know, you know, let me know if there's anything that I can do. I can work with you in the future. And again, in terms of things lining up, he said, I'm actually looking for a new animator right now because my old animator isn't very good at meeting deadlines. And I was like, right, you were saying earlier, what do you say to people at this point? I was like, right, I know exactly what I'm going to say. Well, I pride myself on meeting deadlines. So immediately you've been like, okay, you need me because I'm going to solve the problem that made you fire us animator.
Yeah.
I gave him my card, and then about a month later he got in touch for the first project, which was just these sort of small graphic inserts for one video. It lasted about 20 seconds or something, but you know, I got my work on a Tom Scott video. This is amazing, you know, a video that I knew would inevitably reach at least 1 million views or something like that. And then out of, you know, again, the sort of chance things, the pandemic happened. So he wasn't able to do much YouTube work traveling to places and stuff like that. So he had to do most of his content out of his flat on a green screen. And guess who got to do the animation and VFX and pretty much everything else as part of that video?
Well,
so,
dang.
but like I say, the chance of that happening was entirely out of my hands. But what wasn't out of my hands is impressing him the first time around, meeting the deadline the first time around, you know, really going to town with it, with the quality and attention to detail and ideas. And something funny that happened actually is that I did the second video that I did with him, which was a full VFX. He did green screen presenting, and then I did everything else essentially. I did that in March, and he gave me a Google Docs script and said, "Okay, this is what you've got. You know, I look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with. Here's the footage." And he gave me a couple of directed bits, you know, to the camera. Okay, I'm going to do this now, so whatever. But the majority of it was basically he walks on, and then I have to interpret the script however I want. You know, storyboarding, design, animation. I sent that to him, and he said, you know, oh, this is really good. I really like this. It's you know, you've done an amazing job. I've got a couple of notes, and some of the notes referred to comments on the script, and I was like, I can't really see any comments on the script. And he realized at that point that he'd not shared the Google Docs comments. So all of my work had been done without even seeing all the comments that he put, requesting what he wanted in the video.
Oh no.
But the fact that I had done a job that he was really impressed with and had actually almost done exactly what he wanted or what he would have done himself without seeing any of that direction, just again, the fact that that happened was so coincidental, but maybe it meant that we were on the same wavelength and we thought, you know, we interpreted things very similarly. But that was just very strange. But that impressed him even more because, you know, the fact that I didn't need any direction because I didn't get any because I didn't see the comments because of a, you know, a little mistake or whatever. But that didn't cause a problem at all.
So what I'm getting out of this is your job with Tom Scott, sorry, actually started like years prior when you had worked on something else because of a lucky, maybe not years, a lucky job opportunity here and there. But I guess my overall thought is there's like two parts to your career. There's the one side that's complete random chance, coincidence, luck. And then there's the other side that you can control, and you do everything in your power to control the outcome. You know, you've mentioned deadlines a number of times. You've mentioned quality. You've mentioned coming up with ideas. You've mentioned trying to build relationships, etc. So how, I guess maybe the last thought on this topic is like how, and we've alluded to this so many times, how do you manufacture luck when you can't control it? So you're doing everything you can to control the process, except you can't control the whole coincidental factor. How do you do your best to manufacture this so that you get those opportunities?
It's basically sort of seeing the sort, you know, there's certain things that are in your control, and there's certain things that will never be totally out of your control. And just to take, for example, when I was at university, like I said, there'd be lots of speakers that would come to university, and who comes and whether anyone comes at all often is got absolutely, you know, that is entirely out of your control, because you're not the one that's booking these guests. What is in your control is, so that is entirely luck, the fact that whoever comes and whether people come at all and all that, and you know, if they're even on nights that you're free or whatever, that's entirely luck chance that is often out of your hands. What isn't out of your hands, and this is where manufacturing your own luck, that sort of concept comes into play, is the actual going up to someone afterwards, staying around, making that decision that you're going to speak to them. Because what you've done immediately then is separate yourself from all the people that didn't stay. You know, there's plenty of people that will, you know, see someone talk, but only a small percentage of those people will then actually have a face-to-face conversation, whether it's, you know, having a drink with them, because some people are then going to a pub or a bar afterwards or whatever, and that can be very daunting. It can, and it's something that you need practice on, and actually something that I did when just before I went to uni. So this was when I was 18, at a local art centre. Gary Rydstrom, who is the sound designer for a lot of Pixar films and directed a Pixar short film called Lifted, he came to talk about his work on the Secret Life of is it Secret Life? Yeah, I think Secret Life of Arrietty. That's gonna bug me what that's called, but it's basically the Ghibli film Secret World of Arrietty. There we go. The sort of Ghibli version of The Borrowers, and he was talking about his work on that, and I went up to him afterwards and showed him some work on an iPad. And you know, my mum said that, you know, you've always been someone that goes up to people, and you know, having the courage to just go up to someone like that you admire so much and just be like, okay, this is my work, I want you to see my work. So in terms of actually meeting people, you don't get to choose who you get to stumble across in day-to-day life, like the fact that I didn't know that Tom Scott was going to be there, but I manufactured the look, as it were, by going to that you know, after party in the first place, by then going up to him and having a chat with him, and yeah, by just, I suppose, yeah, being, you know, going up to him, having a chat and talking to him about my work, and having and being open about the fact that, you know, this is what I did, this is the project that I did, and you know, the fact that what I was able to talk to him about was something that I felt was really impressive, and he was impressed by it, that the title sequence I was able to refer to. During the job, I suppose, yeah, it's just all those sort of things of really, not so that you see each job as just the paycheck at the end of it, but having really strong attention to detail during it, having ideas. And sometimes it's difficult because the source material or the concept or whatever is just really not, you're really not getting on with it. It's quite boring, or it's just, you just think, oh, I just want to get onto something more interesting, or, you know, this is the project I have to do so that I can then do something much more fun next week or whatever. But you know, I think as long as you sort of are able to put that aside just for the space of time that you're working on it, and still apply that same attention to detail, that meeting those deadlines and things like that. And a lot of it comes down to, obviously, as well, putting yourself out there. And one thing that I always did when I was at uni is really shout about my work, shout about myself, really try and put myself out there as a student, so that I would be the person that when Look came around and a local studio was looking for someone to join their team, I would not be someone that my tutors might think of, but I would be the first person that they think of. So they're, you know, the first person they'd go to after hearing there was a job offer would be me. And you know, the fact that, like I said, I was doing a technique that was very similar to my fellow tutor Ravi's technique that ended up being used for the Brit Awards. The fact that my tutor knew that I was doing that technique was because I spoke to him so sort of regularly and so openly about the work that I was doing, and showed him all these tests, and the fact that I was doing these tests in my spare time and all these sort of things. It's really about, you know, so manufacturing those scenarios in which luck can come your way instead of someone else's way, or so it is the two sides of that sort of.
That makes a lot of sense. And so like what I'm getting out of this is like, take a look at the random opportunities that exist around you. Maybe Pixar didn't come as a speaker, and so that thing in your head where you're like, I'm so excited to speak to this Pixar person, they didn't show up, whatever, doesn't happen. But there are tons of other people there that you can connect with on a way that makes them think of you as like the go-to person for your skill level. Like you said, Tom, he was booting out his old animator. That means he was going to be on the lookout for new animator. He's probably going to go to his contacts, look on the internet, etc. But you coming up to him specifically in that random coincidence scenario and making sure that he thought of you and giving him something that he could think of you. Oh, deadlines. That's what I need. I'm going to go to Will. That makes sense. So I like that a lot. I want to talk maybe as like the last well, I do want to talk about what you're doing in the future, but maybe as the last topic, I don't know how to organically go into this, but you have the 6 currencies for a project, which I have never seen anybody so succinctly put in a list before of why you should or should not take on client work. And I think it's really interesting. So can you just go through the 6 and list them out and give a little brief explanation of each?
Yeah, sure. So this came from a lecture that I did on the topic of the Christmas Lectures project, because one of the unfortunate things with the sort of setup of that project is that because it's for the Royal Institution, which is a charity, the budget on it is always sort of, it's not the biggest budget in the world. So, I wasn't doing it because it was paying out an enormous fee. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't paying out other things, and this is where the sort of the currencies come into it. So there are, like we've said, obviously, these work opportunities, pay the bills, right? So the first currency is the obvious money, right? You take on projects because they pay the bills, and that's the one that people will obviously think of. Another one is pleasure. So, just the fact that you're going to enjoy this time. I really think that can be undervalued, especially, when we're thinking of freelance. And obviously all of these things you need to pay the bills. You need to make sure you need that, and you need to make sure that you're, buying food and all. Once these are met, basically, it's things that can be a good reason to take on a project after that. So pleasure, you really like working with, maybe it's because of the type of, the person that you really like working with, and the maybe the technique that you like doing, or you like the vision that they've got, you like the idea behind what they're doing, and you believe in that strongly, or you just wanting to do it recreationally or something like that. There is a caveat to all of this, which I will get to at the end. But the third one is exposure, which is, that's like the joke one. That's the sort of, now, I've not got any money to give you, but I'll give you exposure, and they think as if like, telling all their friends about you is going to pay the bills or whatever. Like I say, as long as the bills are paid, then that's fine.
So when does it make sense to do it for exposure then? Because like, it's, with social influencers, et cetera, like, let me stay in your hotel and I'll tell my 1,000 subscribers about you, like.
Exactly. It's really about weighing up what someone's exposure sort of means, especially, I guess, because we've been talking about these as currencies. You can think of someone's exposure sort of currency as having a different exchange rate depending on who they are. Like if someone's got sort of like a couple thousand followers, then they're doing a project just because they're going to put you on their stories or something may well not be worth it at all. But I've got a friend who did a video for Will Smith, and just reaching out, he's become quite popular, about 70,000 followers on Instagram, and has done a lot of stuff for different celebrities. And he doesn't do them necessarily for, they're not necessarily commissions or whatever, but he does them for the fun of it. But also someone like Will Smith, he posts a video on Instagram, it gets viewed by millions of people, but he's got his his account tagged quite high up on the description. check out this insane animation by, this person's Instagram account. That exposure is worth way more than somewhat, a small influencer or something like that. But also, exposure isn't just the metrics of followers or subscribers or anything like that. It can also be just that word of mouth, and that is where it gets a bit sort of, you have got to judge how much is this exposure worth. And I wouldn't condone people just sort of, you don't want to be taken advantage of, and I will go into that a bit more afterwards. But yeah, this isn't sort of to say that people saying that they'll offer you exposure is an alternative to being paid properly, but it can be. And I guess the other thing to link this into the Christmas lectures is that I knew that even though I wasn't being paid an enormous amount, that I knew that it was going to go on TV and it was going to go on the BBC. And it isn't just other people giving you exposure and doing, having other people be the one giving you that exposure. It's also having something to your name that immediately gives you a little bit more sort of power to get someone's attention, being able to
look
say,
at me, I did this for the BBC.
For the BBC, exactly. For
impressive.
BBC, household name in the UK and even sort of abroad as well. To say that you've done something like that, it immediately puts you in a different category of people than all the other people that can't say that they've necessarily done something like that. Similarly, Tom Scott, I'm able to say that I've done videos for Tom Scott, which just our videos that we've both, that we've worked on together have amassed over 30 million views. You can say things like you said, he's got over 3 million subscribers. All of these things, like immediate things that separate you from, people that haven't done that. And that can be worth so much more. That can get you the money that you didn't get for that project because you're able to sort of set yourself apart. The fourth one is practice. So again, maybe there's a technique that you're not quite ready to really sell yourself on at the moment. You're learning CG or 3D animation or whatever it is, and you want a brief to be able to really test these new skills in a way that's not just you coming up with your own random ideas. Sometimes projects can be great for that as well, because you're going to have to start somewhere. I mean, there's only so many tutorials that you can do until you really have to test your new skills on proper projects. And I mean, these are the sort of projects that I did when I was in high school. So when I was learning the Adobe programs and things like that, these projects for people were the perfect opportunity to practice and to have proper briefs. And sometimes people won't necessarily hire you unless you're at a certain level, but you've got to do certain things to be able to get to that level in the first place. It's a bit like that old joke about you want an internship for the experience, but then the internship has a requirement of a certain many years experience. Well, I need experience before I can get experience, sort of thing. So sometimes it can drive you crazy trying to do that, but yeah, to be able to do something because of the practice value it can give you is really potentially good as well. Favor. Now, this one in particular is a bit sort of, you've really got to trust the person that you're wanting to do the favor for, because again, this can be abused. And if someone says, "Oh, I'll do this," there's a favor. Maybe it's I'll repay you when I've got a budget, or I can do something for you. Like, you got to really think, is that person going to be able to do something for me that actually matches the same sort of value? Or are they actually going to deliver on their promise, because it's an informal agreement that doesn't have some sort of written contract or something. For example, I've got a friend who's Ben, who he's done a lot of music for a lot of my projects. And he did a favor for me because it was a project that I had no budget on and was just a sort of fun project that I was experimenting with. He did the music for that as a favor, and I still owe him the favor back, but I've remembered that and I'm going to mention it to him. And, I'm sticking to my word. I'm going to still do a project for free for him in the future. And that's, because he trusts me. He trusted me enough to do that project for free. So I need to sort of repay that by doing the same thing, not just sort of secretly, silently going, I'll just see if he remembers that sort of thing in the future. But I'll probably mention to him in the next couple of days that, do you remember that thing that you did for me a couple of years ago? Like, I'm still up for repaying you, that sort of thing. Because I'd want the same thing back from him. But that's because I know that he trusts me and I trust him. So that sort of thing as well. Oh, hello, we've got a new guest on the show. What's his name?
It's just Moose. He just wanted to come up on my lap, so here he is.
So he's learning about the 6 currencies.
Yeah,
as well.
he's listening. He's we're at number 5. We got one more, Moose.
So the 6th one is charity. Now, again, just because an organization is a charity doesn't mean that they don't have money. Obviously, marketing departments exist for charities, so it's depending on who they are, they should have money to pay for animators and things, and shouldn't be sort of using their charity status to try and persuade people to do work for free. But I, for example, am the lead designer for a local charity called the Will Garvey Trust Foundation, because it's a charity started by friends of the family that I've known since I was probably about 10, and I do a lot of work for them. And the reason that I reached out to them and said I'd be happy to do the work, do certain design work and stuff for free for you, is because I knew that if I didn't reach out, then they would, because they're not animators, because they're not designers, they would probably be stuck with sort of lower quality stuff and probably wouldn't be able to reach as many people or make as much of an impact. And I really believed in the cause. It's a charity promoting mental health, particularly in young males. And I thought that's, I want to get really behind that cause and do whatever I can for them to reach, more people. And I knew that they didn't necessarily have the money to pay me. They may well do in the future, but they don't right now. But I don't mind. I'm happy to just do it for free, because of them starting out as a charity. Similarly, I had a few friends who were a bit unsure about me taking on the Christmas lectures job a second time round, because of the fact that I ought to be paid proper amount. But I knew the situation. I knew the financial situation. The production company was very upfront with me about it, that they weren't getting much. This is a passion project for them as well, because the Royal Institution that is putting on these lectures is a charity. So their budget is immediately shrinked because they're not a sort of private company. And most projects that don't, I get a reduced budget for, or even zero budget for, are often a combination of different currencies like this. And I've sort of internalized, I suppose at the end of the day, it's up to you whether you want to take on projects. I've got, like I said, I've got friends and family or whatever who may disagree with me taking on projects, often for just looking out for me, not wanting me to be exploited. But I'm the one that ultimately feels confident enough to be able to tell whether I feel like this is a good move for me or whatever. And the other thing I want to stress as well is that this isn't to say that you should keep yourself open to being taken advantage of. You've really got to be sort of smart about judging whether someone, for example, the favor, is someone going to actually be able to pay you back in the same amount, or is someone just going to use that as an opportunity to sort of exploit you? I suppose you got to think like, okay, you probably do have a budget. You're probably paying other people, so why couldn't you pay me, sort of thing. I don't know. You've just got to really judge it, and this isn't me condoning people sort of using or sort of paying people in exposure. And also at the end of the day, like I say, often for some people, these sort of projects, they have to pay money because they're living paycheck to paycheck, or they need to get bills paid. So given your financial situation, given how you feel about the client or the project or whatever, you got to really judge all these things. But I suppose it's just to be able to feel like, just because something isn't being paid in either the right amount or at all, doesn't immediately eradicate any advantages to taking on that project. And I'm, the fact that I got the Tom Scott project, all the 17 videos that I've done with him, and all the other YouTubers what I've worked with, I only got that because I decided to do the Christmas lectures the second time round. Which, if I was a stickler for the money and the budget, then I would have, not been able to do those projects that led on from that at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's like these 6 currencies depends on how you treat them, and if you treat them with the respect and the success you want to give them, they can lead you to build up your career in different areas, just like you explained. I just want to wrap them up again because I wrote them down.
Mm-hmm.
So money obviously is the first one to pay your bills. Pleasure, you're enjoying it, which means you're probably going to do a great job anyways, and people are going to enjoy it as well. Exposure, if you're doing something maybe less than pay to get in front of other people who may end up paying you. Practice, if you're not so good at something and you need to broaden your skill set. A favor, which is a reciprocal thing, which you need to remind your friend of. and charity, and just doing something for the goodness of giving back. And I think that's great. And I really like how you've put these, and they make a lot of sense to me. And it's like I'm immediately thinking about some of the projects that I'm doing right now and how they fit in, because not all of them are for money. Some of them are for, like, I'm doing one purely because I just absolutely loved the idea and I was like, I have to make this. And I'm doing another one for practice because I want to meld 2D and stop motion together. And so this is an opportunity with this client I'm working with to do that. So I was like, I have never done this before. I want to try to do this to my best ability. So I guess as we're wrapping up, can you just tell me, what's next for you? You've worked on all these amazing projects. We talked about your career, but I know that you're also launching something on the sidelines here. So why don't we briefly speak about that?
About a few months ago, at this point, I've launched the trailer for Learn with Will. So as is obviously the case with many countries around the world, the UK went back into lockdown at the start of January, and one of the most difficult aspects of lockdown the first time around, all around the world, was homeschooling. So they realised that YouTube videos, obviously the fact that we've got YouTube during the pandemic has been incredibly helpful for kids and parents and teachers to teach from home. But it was still found to be an incredibly difficult process. And I spent 2020 doing, animating for people like Tom Scott, for people like Matt Parker, science, English and maths videos for these popular YouTubers. And I felt like it was the perfect opportunity to then do the same sort of thing specifically for making homeschooling easier. So Learn with Will is a series of is a new YouTube channel with fun animated videos teaching science, English and maths. I'd like to think of it as, you do, there's a lot of people that do like fitness workouts, like the guy called Joe Wicks here in the UK that, PE with Joe. Who are you doing your PE with? Oh, I'm doing PE with Joe. And then you Learn with Will sort of thing as well. And to really make all these subjects, all these topics really engaging, and something that I hated when I was a kid, when I was at school, and I think a lot of people feel the same way, especially something like maths. You learn like a Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Like, that's great and everything, but you immediately think, why am I learning this? Because a lot of the time you learn it for the purposes of being able to, show that you've learned it in an exam. Like, there's no sort of, often you're not learning it for just learning about the beautiful world of mathematics, because people are like, maths isn't beautiful, it's boring, because you're taught it in often ways that are quite boring. And so I thought, right, I'm going to make these resources to make learning fun, make it really engaging, make it properly, put everything that I've learned about animation, but also taking a project from start to finish, really thinking about the structure and the format of content and things like that. Really apply that to learning in these 3 subjects. So each video is on a different topic within the subject of science, English and maths. But also there's games to play as well. Again, I call them games. I don't call them tests or quizzes or anything like that. They're games, really, to sort of change the language that is used and make it hopefully more enjoyable. I'm in some videos I'll be joined by people, like Dr. Sheila, who is from the Royal Astronomical Society here in the UK. Her video about the planets will be part of the launch tomorrow. And other people that, other really sort of clever people, so it's almost like I'm learning with the people that are watching the videos as well, and that things that I wouldn't necessarily be able to write scripts on, they can help me with. But also every video will come with a downloadable worksheet as well, to make sure that you can keep practicing afterwards with fresh questions, or play those games again but with new content. Every video has subtitles as well, to make sure that everyone can learn with Will, and a downloadable transcript as well. For hard of hearing or deaf, students, or if the way that you learn is actually in a situation like on the, maybe not the train, because I feel like that's a lot less common at the moment with COVID, but in a situation in which you can't have things on out loud, I've made sure that subtitles are on, and not just the automatic ones on YouTube, but the exact script as it is from the video. But hopefully they'll be appropriate for all ages, not just people that are doing homeschool at the moment, but just people that maybe you're in your exams and you're, at the end of high school or something like that, and you need a refresher, and fractions, for whatever reason, when you were a kid, just completely went over your head. And the two options that you've got to learn more about fractions, really basic fundamental fractions, either are sort of really dreary or really sort of academic, covering fractions that are really not engaging, or really condescending, patronizing, kids oriented sort of stuff that is, let's sing a song about fractions, and it makes you feel like an idiot for having to look at something so simple again. Hopefully people can feel like it's appropriate for them as well, or just people that want to learn about the planets, and they can never remember the order of the planets, and they watch University Challenge or something like that, like quiz shows on telly, or Jeopardy or whatever, and they just want to have that banked in their mind of what the order of the planets is, because they've never been able to remember it. And they just, they watch this video and they can test their knowledge and stuff like that, even though they're not at school, and they're never going to have to know the names of the planets at all, but it's just to satisfy their curiosity. And this goes back to the currencies as well, because starting a new YouTube channel, like, people think of YouTube as, like Tom or Matt or whoever else, where it's their job, and they you can put ads on YouTube videos and people earn a lot of money from YouTube. But when you're starting off a channel, you can't put ads on your videos anymore unless you've got a certain number of subscribers and a certain number of watch hours. And that went up about, I think it was like last year or the year before, they increased that. So that threshold is even higher before you can start earning anything from it. And even then, the amount that you earn, you have to get a lot of views before you can earn any substantial amount of money from it. So this is entirely out of my own pocket. And so I'm not doing it for the purposes of earning money, but I'm hopefully going to turn it into my main focus, to see how things go. I'm doing it for the pleasure of it, because I just really like the idea of people getting the benefit of finding it easier to teach their kids, or taking the pressure off teachers or parents finding these really high quality resources. And it's a lot of practice as well. There's I'm learning a lot of new techniques, or solving a lot of problems that I'd also do with a client project, but the pressure's off because it's not got a deadline to it, so I can really take my time with this. You could say it's sort of a charity thing as well, in a way, but not wanting to over-egg it like I'm Mother Teresa or something. But just the fact that I'm doing it just out of the sort of the benefit that it will give others. And yeah, just I've had a couple of like family friends that have tried it on their kids, or teachers that have had a look at it, and just seeing a photo of my friends' kids filling in the worksheets for the planets video, where one of the things is you've got a blank circle and some questions, and there's a new planet has been discovered. What does the planet look like? Draw your sort of planet and answer the questions. What's the name of the planet? What's what type of planet is it, like gas or rocky or something else? What lives on the planet? And they're just they're filling it in, or they're engaging with it, or the same kids. So, they could never remember the names of the planets, or they never understood fractions, and then this video just got it for them, and they got sort of a good their teacher was like, oh, that's, I'm really proud of you, I'm really sort of that really good job, sort of thing, because of the videos that I'd done. That is, I don't need to get paid for that sort of thing to be worthwhile to me at all. Like, I'm very much the pleasure of animating and the pleasure of making a difference and seeing your work actually touching people. And I guess that's part of what being a director or something at Pixar has always appealed to me. Is I don't know, there must be something that, although he probably never necessarily talks about it in interviews or whatever, but there must be something that Pete Docter gets from being the guy that made Monsters Inc. or being the guy that made Up, because Up, for example, is so often cited as like the most emotionally pulling at your heartstrings, Pixar film. Or I did the Pixar Masterclass in 2014, where 3 people from Pixar did lectures and stuff like that in London. And one of the guys, Ricky Nerva, who actually he drew Mike and signed it for me. He had a chat. There was someone that came to those masterclasses who had Mike tattooed on her leg, and just to think, like, he made Mike, he created Mike in his sketchbook, and there's someone from the other side of the world that has inked that permanently on her leg. That sort of thing. Just you've made a mark, quite literally, in the world. Yeah. That is just, that's the sort of thing that I love. And even if it's, whether it's a big sort of mainstream thing like a Pixar film, or it's because you've made a difference in people's lockdown teaching things, or whatever it is, or just one person you put a smile on my face. I was feeling rubbish today, but I saw your film, or I saw your shorts on Instagram, whatever, and it really made me, that sort of making a difference thing. I suppose that goes into pleasure, but you could even turn that into another currency itself, because it goes a bit deeper than that. But that's, yeah.
No, I love this, and thank you for putting together Learn with Will. This sounds incredible, actually, and it's super ambitious as well. You keep saying like it's gonna have a downloadable thing, and I can imagine the amount of incredible work that goes into this. So thank you for doing this. I think that's really cool. I don't know what else to say from here. I really like what you said about making an impact, and how just seeing one kid kind of learn something from something that you've done, it feels incredible. I'm just wondering, maybe as a final question, say somebody's listening to this and they're thinking about the freelance life because they've realized that this kind of really fits who they are, just like you did. What is maybe one thing they can do after listening to this podcast, like tonight, that will have a long-term impact, like something immediate right now?
I think one of the things is sort of thinking of, okay, what can you offer? What sort of person can you be for someone that will immediately make you stand out? Whether it's a certain project that you've done in the past, or if you've not even done any projects yet at all, like, what is it about you that means that you're not just a random animator? Like, I think one of the things that I think would be more common, but sometimes because people are an animator just for the job, but maybe it's because you are super passionate just about animation in general. Like, I mean, just on the other side of things, on the other side of my, my setup, I've got these, like Link from Missing Link and Kubo pop figures, and, really sort of decorated my sort of office to be full of animation stuff. Because I just absolutely adore animation. I love the concept of it. It's it's magic. It always feels like magic to me. Ever since I was a young kid, and I think really fostering why someone should pick you, whether it's because you've got a really great passion in it, or you've got a very specific skill of a certain program, or upcoming technology, or what you specialize in VR animation, or like you said, someone at Pixar specializing in storyboarding, or there's finding your little niche, your little area of animation that you love. Or if it's like me, you wanting to offer the whole process, really refining all those things. I mean, there's plenty of courses to, maybe you wanting to expand your skill set. And for example, recently I've done a course about hand-drawn traditional animation, which I've never really done much of before. Really feel a lot more confident doing that now. I'm really happy with how that all turned out. And I can now add that to my sort of list of things potentially to offer to clients. I suppose also maybe having a look at, this would have been much more appropriate to talk about pre-COVID, but if your city or your town or something like that hosts, events of some kind, if there's local clubs or local organizations that do lectures, or if you're at university, and I suppose this is still the case in that there's Zoom, you might have Zoom speakers or something, but there's just not the opportunity to meet them afterwards necessarily. But there may well be an opportunity for a Q&A, So if that is the case, then being someone that asks a question, really taking the time before the lead up to that Zoom event or something to really think, okay, what could I ask this person? A meaningful question that maybe shows them that you've looked at their body of work, or maybe you reference something that isn't just necessarily the film that they're there to talk about, but is something that they did years ago or something, but shows that you've had a look at their back catalogue or whatever, and just making that effort. I mean, that will immediately sort of set yourself apart from so many other people. And I think another thing is just to really, like I say, foster that passion, foster that excitement, foster that love for animation, the thing that sets your soul on fire about animation. Never lose sight of that, because sometimes you can with client projects and when it becomes a job, and sometimes you need to recharge your batteries and do projects that aren't for money, maybe for the other currencies, because it makes you fall in love with animation again. I'd say that's the main one. The last one is the main one.
Gotcha.
Never fall out of love with animation if you can. Try and foster that passion.
So the three things you can do tonight is: one, figure out what that thing is that you are really good at and you want to be good at. Number two is find a way to get connected with other people, and through that, get your voice heard about what you're good at. Number three is to figure out how to foster your passion and love for animation. Cool.
And sometimes I should say actually that something that I really want to stress is that it's very easy to assume that people that have found success within, whether it's animation or whatever else, are because they are doing absolutely everything within their sort of reach to find these clients. Like I said, a lot of clients that I got wasn't because I was applying for jobs left, right and center and every single day. It was just these chance encounters. I was definitely in the sort of position where I was worried that other people were much better than I was, and that I wasn't ever going to sort of reach that. Why can't I be doing what they're doing or whatever? And you may well feel like, oh, Will's doing stuff for Tom Scott, what am I doing wrong? Things will sort of, align, the stars will align for you potentially at some point. Like I said, it's about sort of using those to your best advantage, but it's also helping you to see that someone else that has got those projects, it doesn't mean that they're definitely more gifted than you, or you're doing something wrong, or right, I need to really sort of do everything I can possible to reach as many people as possible, and then you just burn out and, like I say, lose that fire in your soul that made you love animation in the first place. I also, to make sure that I still enjoy it, still love it, and still have that passion for it, that involves taking time off. It involves really doing the best you can to keep yourself well. And that is even more so for me because of my cystic fibrosis, making sure that I'm, having good exercise routines and mental. I've burnt out a few times mentally, and it's a horrible experience. And, I feel like every time that has happened, I've come away from it with a lot more understanding of my mental health and a lot more understanding of the triggers that to avoid, and when I know that something's taking over. And so this new project, Learn with Will, I'm approaching it in a different way to stuff that I've done in the past, where not setting myself too enormous expectations and really trying to take every day as it comes, because otherwise you are just gonna. I've fallen out of love with animation before, but actually that happening has made falling back in love with it all the more sweeter. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think a common theme throughout our chat has been kind of the luck of things. And when you said, when you're looking at other people's successes and the clients they work with, they're just getting as lucky as you are with your things. I think it's more about pursue the thing you want and the opportunities, and put yourself out there with the opportunities that come in your way. Maybe your goal is to work at Pixar, and maybe somebody who works there, their goal wasn't to work at Pixar, it was just to be an amazing storyboard artist. And then Pixar hired them because their goal was to be an amazing storyboard artist based on the opportunities. So yeah, I think it's clearly a common theme in everybody I chat with, but I really like how you put it over, talking about your journey and career, and definitely, with the burnout and the falling in love and taking breaks and stuff. I think that's important too.
I think also just it's also just one last tiny thing is that it's sort of about being honest with yourself about what you want, and being open to change. And maybe you do get that dream job and it's not your dream in the end. Like it's actually, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and that's okay. You haven't failed, or you haven't sort of, just because your childhood dream didn't turn out the way it did. I mean, my uncle, for example, is a storyboard artist for films and TV and stuff, but he started off as an animator, as an in-betweener for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And he did all the, he did in-betweens for Jessica Rabbit. And that taught him a lot, but the main thing it taught him is that he never wanted to do that ever again, because he hated it. It was such a slog. But then he got into becoming a successful storyboard artist. So, you may get that dream job, and you may have worked for 10 years or something like that, put things in motion to get that dream job. You get it, and it's just not what you expected or whatever. So that's okay. That's all right. Just being honest with yourself about, do I really want this anymore? Because sometimes that may change, and that's also healthy and totally fine.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. Yeah. well, thank you for all those good points. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast as well. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing about your journey, and I've liked all the little bits of wisdom you've put in throughout, and especially I really enjoyed the 6 currencies, because I think you put that in such a succinct way. So yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you want to follow Will or get in touch with him, you can do so by checking out his Instagram or his website, or also the recently launched Learn with Will. And I'm going to include links to all of these in the description of this chat, so please check them out. And that's all for now. So thanks so much for listening. Okay, bye.
The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer, and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.